So we are allowed only two. All right, we're live at all. We're gonna get started. And it's difficult, and we say this every time, it's difficult to hear when we have side chatter. So let's try to keep to one person speaking at a time to the extent possible. I'm Ladidra Matthews with Parker Co. Thank you for coming to or joining our Citizens Redistricting Committee community listening session. I will start off by giving an overview of the criteria selected by the committee in this process, and then you'll hear from Dana Clucky for a description of the maps, followed by some housekeeping rules from Sue Shorts before we get started. So the criteria are as follows: equal population, allowance of deviation, contiguity, compactness, precincts and community of interest, allowance for growth, race, and public acceptance. And I'll briefly explain each of those. So equal population. All districts should be relatively equal in population and may deviate at a rate no more than 5% above or below the ideal district size. Contiguity. All precincts in a district must be contiguous to another precinct in the same district. Contiguity may be maintained by a single point of connection. Compactness. Districts should be reasonably compact. Compact districts tend to resemble geometric shapes such as squares or triangles with straight borders, or be somewhat circular in shape. Precincts and communities of interest. Precincts will be the basic building blocks of districts, and precincts will not be split unless absolutely necessary to achieve a lawful plan. Communities of interest, such as neighborhoods or regions where the residents have common political interests, will be preserved to the extent reasonably possible. Allowance for growth. Plans may take into account anticipated population growth within proposed districts as determined by census data and land development trends. Race. Race may be taken into account in drawing districts, but it may not be the predominant criteria. And finally, public acceptance. This is the consideration of whether the public will perceive the proposed new districts as fair and reasonable. With that, I will turn it over to Dana to talk to you about the maps that were put forth, by the Committee for Public Comment.
All right, good evening. We're going to talk now about the maps that the committee decided upon last week. And we're also going to show you online what this looks like for the folks at home to see. So there are 4 proposed maps, starting with the pie-shaped draft map. You can open that up, TJ. So with this proposal, there were several shifts that were made. This is to reflect the council district boundaries that were in place in 2001. I won't go over all of the changes that are made through this map, but there are 22 precincts that will move council districts through this plan. The next is the moderate change draft map. This map was previously seen by the committee entitled as C5. There are 5 precinct shifts with this map. Precinct G26 is moving from Council District 2 to 3. Precinct SUM1 from Council District 1 to 5. Precinct G57 from Council District 1 to 5. Precinct G62 from Council District 5 to 4. And at the committee meeting last week, the committee did ask staff to consider an alternative to moving G62 to District 4 to avoid extending that district south of I-40. The last change in the moderate change map is removing precinct G13 from Council District 3 to 4. Moving to the least change draft map. This plan is that of least change. There are two precincts that would be affected. Precinct G26 would be split into two separate council districts along North Church Street. Currently in Council District 2, this proposal would divide precinct G26 with a portion moving to Council District 3. And precinct G51 would move from Council District 1 to 4. And the last one on the 4 maps that we have is the C2 draft map. And this draft was brought forward from the consulting attorneys after the meeting of this committee last week. It's in response to the committee asking to edit the C5 map. In this map, precinct G26 is moving from Council District 2 to 3. And precinct G13 is moving from Council District 3 to 4. We also wanted to point out another feature of this redistricting website. PJ, if you'll go back to the website and click on the interactive draft maps on the left column. The interactive draft maps, just to the left. That's okay. Thanks. So we feel like this is going to give people a better understanding of these proposals, and they can dive into these maps a little bit more so than the PDFs that are online. So we've got different tabs at the top of the screen where you can see the current council configuration, and then on the side you can see the numbers related to the districts, and that includes the population of the districts currently and some of the demographic breakdown. If you'll click over to the next tab, PJ. In this map, you'll see the pie-shaped draft map. And this will allow people to see which precincts are being adjusted. And also, if you were to click any area of the map, there's some pop-ups that come up and it gives you more information. Lastly, there's a feature, the magnifying glass lets people enter in their address, any address that they're particularly interested in, and find how things would be adjusted in each plan there. So I believe that's it for the maps.
So Sue is usually our moderator, but I know that she's wrapping up in another city meeting, so I will go over housekeeping briefly. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak. You will be called on to speak in the order that you signed up for the Zoom registration link. If you have additional comments to make after your initial 3 minutes, please either raise your hand using the raise hand feature on Zoom, or put additional comments in the comment box. And the committee is here to listen. After our listening session is over, we will debrief as a committee at that time. But right now, they're just here to listen to your feedback and comments on the proposed maps. We'll start with Shanley White. Yes, and Shanley, we will come back to you. If you have comments, please unmute yourself at that time. Next on our list is Omarius Jones.
Mute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I kind of got on the call a little late, So I kind of missed, I guess, the first portion of it. So right now I don't have anything to add, but I guess maybe a little later.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Next on the list is Gary Mccants.
Good evening. How are you?
Great. Hello.
Good. I'm Gary Mccants, 1101 North Elm Street. I don't have any questions, but is there an agenda? Or you just, how are you conducting the meeting? I'm not sure. You're just picking up from when you left off. This is my first meeting to attend.
Thanks for joining us. That's a very good question. So typically the committee meetings are open to the public and that you are able to view them virtually. Today is our listening session. So we're hoping to get feedback from the public on the maps that were proposed, or not proposed, put forward to the public by this committee. If you are at your computers now, you can go to the Greensboro Redistricting website and see those draft maps. There were 4. So we're asking for input from the community on the maps, or if you have anything generally to share with us about the redistricting process, we'd love to hear them now. And if you're just here to listen and see what happens with the committee, that's okay too. So to answer your other question, which was the agenda, at the beginning, we didn't miss very much. We did an introduction. We provided an overview of the maps that were published for public input, an overview of the redistricting criteria used to draft those maps. And then we just gave housekeeping rules in that each member of the public who would like to speak is allocated 3 minutes. And if you have additional comments, you can leave those in the comment box. Once we see that there are no longer, or we've taken all of the public comments and feedback, then the engagement portion of the meeting will be closed, and that means we'll no longer take comments from the public, those of you who have joined us on Zoom, but you are welcome to continue to watch the meeting as the committee discusses the feedback or discusses the maps proposed, the put forward for public input, excuse me.
I have 2 other questions. One is, what districts are in question or being redrawn? And I'm quite sure there's a list of the persons who are serving on the committee. I don't see that on the Zoom call.
Absolutely. So is it possible to screen share and pull back up the redistricting website?
Are you asking me that?
I'm sorry, no, I'm speaking to our IT gurus in the room. So are you able to see the screen with the website up now?
Yes, I'm looking at it.
Okay, so on this website, this is our hub for the redistricting process. So here you will find the criteria that the committee is using. You can also find the committee members and their respective affiliations to the right. And you can then, all the way to the left, you'll see something that says draft maps and additional data. That is where the maps are housed. Can you click on pie-shaped draft map? If you select the maps, then there is a drop box in the right-hand corner of each map that gives you a summary of the changes. So it tells you exactly which precincts were moved and from what district to the new district. There's also a population summary report at the bottom of that page, but also on the next 2 pages that provide statistical information for each proposed map.
Okay. I'll go to your website, but those are the questions I had. I just jumped in the middle of it and just didn't know where you started or where it's going to end here. So thanks for that information.
No problem. We appreciate you for being here. Thank you.
Welcome.
Danny Brown, are you with us, and would you like to provide public comment?
Excuse me, what was your question?
I was asking if you wanted to provide any feedback or comments for the committee to consider today.
Well, actually, I just got on. I was on the other meeting with the mayor and those, and I'm kind of baffled, really, to be honest with you, is if this is such an important meeting, I think one of these two meetings should have been postponed because there are a lot more people on the town hall meeting than this meeting. So I don't know. Well, my question and concern is, can we do another meeting like this? Because this is important.
Thank you for those comments, Mr. Brown. I certainly agree that this is important, and this was, the meetings were not, scheduled at the same time, on purpose. That was very inadvertent. So we do apologize for any inconvenience that caused anyone. I will make a note, to see if we're able to do, a meeting like this again. I'll also let you know that you can provide, any feedback that you have at any time, not just during a listening session. But if you go out to the website, there's a link to email the committee. This committee meets as needed. The next scheduled meeting is October 12th. And so again, you won't, that's not a listening session, but all of the meetings are public meetings. They're held in public session. So anyone can join in that way and keep up with what's going on, in addition to checking out the website we just showed on the screen. And another difficulty in scheduling another meeting like this is that we're working on a very tight timeline. So during the town hall, the District 2 town hall, I briefly spoke about the timeline. The committee is expected to suggest or recommend have their final recommendation to City Council October 12th, so that City Council can have a public hearing on that, on whatever is proposed October 19th, with a vote to take place on November 1st. So again, because of the timeline that we have, I don't know that we will be able to have another session like this, but there are other avenues for you to provide input, and we welcome you to do that.
I certainly appreciate your comment, but the reason why I said that is because on the meeting that's before this, a lot of people are asking questions in reference to the redistricting and drawing the lines. And if you have a deadline of October the 12th, which is basically 2 weeks from now, I don't think you're gonna get the public input that you need to get a good recommendation to City Council for their October the 19th meeting. That's why I brought it up. I mean, I'm listening to both meetings now, and trust me, there are a lot of people asking questions on this other Zoom call.
I appreciate that, and we will take that into consideration. At this time, if there's anyone else who would like to provide feedback that is on Zoom, if you could raise your hand at this time so that you can be unmuted. And if it sounds okay for the committee and for Matt, I think that we can start, if there are no more public comments, we can start the committee deliberation at 7:30, so that's in about 2 minutes, to allow anybody else to join and see if there's any feedback.
With either, I think there's one more person joining. Sue Polinsky signed up to speak.
Hi, Sue Polinsky, thanks for joining. Did you have any comments or feedback for the committee to consider? If so, please, thank you.
I don't have any questions right now. I'm listening. I do want to know from the previous gentleman who spoke where the link is for the other meeting he was talking about.
Is she in District 2?
I don't think so, but she can still attend.
No, she still can, but the email basically went out to People in District 2, town hall for.
Mr. Brown, do you have, a link, or can you tell, Ms. Polinsky how she can join the District 2 Town Hall?
Oh, that's it. Okay, I didn't
I'm
realize
not
it was
sure.
District 2.
I'm not sure. Well, there's people on there that's not from District 2, trust me. But the way they set it up, there was a link sent out or email invite, and you had to pre-register. So I guess if someone at the city could contact Councilperson Wells, that they probably could get that link sent to whoever it needs to be on that town hall, because like I said, there's some good stuff being discussed. And, it's just, I understand that we on tight lines and stuff, but, this is too important to, for people that should be on this call, not to be on this call. Thank you.
And it looks like one more person is joining. We'll give Andrew Stern a moment to connect to audio. Andrew Stern, would you like to provide any feedback or comments for the committee to consider with regard to the redistricting process?
I'm just listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, we have several folks who have joined us on Zoom. I'm going through the list of participants that we have, but if there's anybody else who would like to provide comments or feedback at this time, please unmute yourself.
I have a question about the census and the redistricting. We've got a census that is questionable, but how much of the redistricting is, I'm not going to start my video, but how much of the redistricting is based on the census data that we got, or is it based on anything else?
Sure, so the census data is a integral part of the redistricting process. So based on the census data, when we look at the districts and the lines as currently drawn, we look at the population for each district. And if any district is above or below more than 5% above or more than 5% below the ideal district size, which is, so I explained it in the town hall, and that in an ideal world, all 5 districts of Greensboro would have identical populations. And so our ideal district size in Greensboro is 59,815, I believe. And so again, if a district is more than 5% above that target, or more than 5% below that target, then the requirement to redistrict is triggered. And then we look at that census data, the planning department in particular, to inform the map drawing process. Now, the census data is considered along with our list of criteria that we started the meeting with. And again, you can find the website, on our website, you can find the criteria listed there and an explanation of each criteria. And I will read them to you very briefly here. Those criteria considered our equal population and allowed deviation. That's very connected to the kind of discussion that we just had about census data. Contiguity, compactness, precincts and communities of interest, allowance for growth, race, and public acceptance. And so those are what we use to inform the map drawing process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more comments from the folks that have joined us on Zoom? If not, then at this time, the committee will start their deliberations. I believe, I'm looking to our IT gurus again, I believe everyone will be muted at this time and will not have access or the ability to unmute yourself, but Obviously, you are welcome to stay and listen to the rest of the committee meeting, and we appreciate you for being here once again.
We need that on the.
So Peter, I did want to mention, since you mentioned the redistricting website, I just wanted to let the committee know, we have received one email from the website. And it says, is it possible to see the demographics of the precincts being proposed to be moved? And that is something that we, staff are working on to show. And that's the only email we have received.
Thank you very much. All right, committee, so you have the 4 maps. You'll notice that the names have changed slightly, but the 3 maps that you selected during our last meeting have not changed. In addition, you'll see a C2 draft map. This was not considered by you all at the last committee meeting, but in response to the request to see if G62, so if you look at the moderate change map, there's a lot of discussion about the desire to have G62 in District 5 since it's on the south side of I-40. That was taken into consideration, and us as the consultants, working with the planning department, drafted the C2 map. And like Dana said earlier, this map moves precinct G26 from council district 2 to 3, and it moves precinct G13 from district 3 to 4. And puts G62 back into district 5.
Yeah, so just thoughts on the C2 draft map. I mean, it just sort of moving those two, it's really close to our least change draft map, but frankly does a worse job of addressing growth and looking at the deviation. So it just from my perspective, looking at C2, I don't know that it's necessarily a winner. I appreciate the staff's work in trying to figure out something to address the G62 question, but I don't know that I would say that C2 is better than any of the 3 that we were already taking a look at.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure. Good first try. I'm not sure it's the final answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other comments on C2? Matt, how did you want us to move forward with the 4 maps? Were there any comments on the other 3 since the last time we met?
Question on the least change map. Is it me or is G26 not shown split on that map?
It's 2 different colors along Church Street. Purple on the left side, red on the right.
That district would be split.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I got confused by the cross hatching in the District 2 part of it, but I do, thanks.
And I'll make sure I'm correct, that district in question, G26, would be split.
Right,
Okay.
right.
And then, am I also correct that early on, one of the issues, the criteria we were looking at is trying as best we can to avoid splitting districts?
You're correct on both accounts.
Yes.
Okay. I
Yeah.
just want to make sure.
And from last time, the least change draft is, putting out a map so that folks, just hearing from the public, really thought we're good with what we got, we want to do the absolute bare minimum. That's where we got that discussion of, if, 1.5 precincts, making that adjustment.
Yeah, so the reason we split that was the first draft of this map had a GO2 pulled out of District 2 and put in District 3, and we had reason to believe that that did not consider communities of concern.
Right. And we chose G26 to do this with because G26 is humongous and the split would not, I mean, it would benefit, I think, for us to split it.
Yeah.
It's just that huge. Church Street.
Yeah. But that's the kind of thing that we hope to hear from community members.
Mhm.
If they know more about their neighborhoods and need to tell us some things.
I just make sure make sure I know where we are. Are we now just discussing maps as we on our program?
Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
Well,
So
let me just interject this then. On the pie shaped map, which is the map with the most changes, as I think my way through it, as I recall, this was based on some historical lines. But this map gives the entire city some interest or skin in the game relative to our downtown. Am I correct? And when we get this
Close
thing,
to it, District 5 doesn't come all the way into downtown and.
well, how close to that?
But close,
But it's
yeah.
close.
And the dynamic is, if we're gonna be a city, in my opinion, a dynamic city, and all the citizens focus to make this a great city. As I heard one politician say, whose name will go unnamed. If you're gonna have a city, you gotta have a vibrant core. Center City has to be a vibrant core. And I do believe in my thought, that we need the entire city of Greensboro to have some skin in the game or interest in the core of Greensboro. So I see some negatives if you have districts that really don't touch the downtown, because then they are basically alienated from downtown and the interest of the downtown sector, which is critical, in my opinion, to the growth and vibrance of this city going forward, that we maintain and stabilize and grow our downtown area. So that's one of the reasons when this map came up before, I personally felt it was a map that deserved consideration and to be put out for public comment. And I just want to make sure everybody knew my thought process on how I got to that point. I mean, this is an inexact science, but at least I subjectively have a reason for wanting all our citizens to feel a connection to the core of our city. So I hope that will be in your thought process as we go forward.
Absolutely, I agree. I think that's going to be important moving forward, that at least our maps reflect a united city. And I think the pie shape map gives us that, the drawback, however, is that so many precincts are affected, 22 precincts. And I know that can be troublesome for residents as well as the city having to do whatever they need to do. So I am at least cognizant of that, but I still hold that a centralized, at least on paper, a centralized city that is connected to the score, to Attorney Donald's point, I think will be it will prove that we've done our due diligence and that, we've at least given consideration beyond, any one particular district or demographic, but about, United City.
Yeah. And as Reverend Hunt makes the point, even though there may be some changes, it's not changes in where people vote. There's only changes as who's gonna come to them and say, I am your representative. Let's carry forth the needs of this district. So, I know it is, it requires, I guess, more work. I'm trying to come up with a technical way to say it. But listen, if we want to be a dynamic city, we can't be afraid to work and put things in position to be successful. We can't want to be stalemated. We don't want to get hung up on what I would call tribalism, where we against ourselves. So we need to try as best we can to organize our precincts in a way that there's a common interest in the political process they find themselves. So again, that's my thought process on that particular matter.
So one other thing to add on the pie-shaped map is that in addition to that inner core interest, you also have in every district areas where there's undeveloped areas. Now, they vary on how far they can go, but so in addition to that inner, we also in all those districts have that outer as well. So it arguably gives, member council broader perspective that they got to have.
That's well said. And Ryan, thinking about the future, and that's what I think we need to really focus on. We need to try to bring these maps into a proposal that's within the legal criteria, but anticipating our needs of our city. I've expressed what I thought about the core, and I think what you just said is very important because we're gonna be developing the perimeter as we go forward and having council members who have a stake in that, as opposed to isolating people who only deal with downtown and don't care about the outer limit and vice versa. So that's a very good point.
Anybody else have anything to say on that now? Eleanor? Yeah, I concur with everything that's been said. We know your change, we talked about it last time, your point that there's so many districts that move, but I think Steve is right that we can't be afraid of change. We need to do the right thing. If nothing changes, nothing changes. So, that said, I think probably this map, and I hope I'm not jinxing myself with this, but of all these maps, unless, we hear from some neighborhoods that we've missed some vote or other, of all these maps, I think this one is going to require the most work to get it optimized. District, it just is. So that's the one that I'm gonna want to spend a lot more time with.
You referring to the
pie-shaped map, right? Yeah.
By optimize, you talk about the
Just like-
population and,
All of it, all of our
Yeah.
criteria, making sure
Yeah.
we've done the best job we can do.
yeah.
Wait, on dominant conversation.
For instance, while the target deviations are legal, they're not the best for accommodating the future growth that we can predict. So we just need to, that one needs some more thought, I think.
And when you say that, what particular district are you focusing on?
Well, for instance, District 3 looks now like it can grow.
Right.
But it can't grow on its northwestern boundaries, it can't grow into Summerfield or Oak Ridge. So it's actually landlocked there. And to grow north into, up towards the Reidsville line, you actually have to cross our lakes, our reservoirs with water and sewer, and that's just long story short, that's very expensive to engineer, and it's there's demand up there,
Yeah.
but can the demand afford the price to move water and sewer up there? So District 3 might be effectively landlocked for at least 10 years. And District 5, as it's drawn on this map, it's got more room to grow, but it's kind of blocked in by Jamestown and High Point some. And District 4 is, did we get the overlay with the growth tier boundary?
Yes, it was sent to.
Okay, great. But is Pleasant Ridge Road still our western boundary with growth tier maps? Do you remember?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, Pleasant Ridge Road it's ridge. And if that's still the growth boundary, then, it would be difficult and expensive to extend water and sewer into, precinct NDR1. So we just need to look through these things.
Educate me on this point, because will the drawing of a district as to where people vote going to change the ability of developers to develop, whether or not it borders District 5 or District 4 or District, whatever the district,
Right.
wherever the development opportunity is. How does your voting location challenge the logistical aspects of providing service to that spot?
Right. So first off, excellent question. The voting location is not going to have a big effect on that, presumably. Except to the extent that a citizen at, say, a rezoning hearing wants something or doesn't want something in his district. But folks are usually concerned about their neighborhood, not their city council district. But the city council member who is going to be the first point of contact for anybody getting a rezoning is, we're going to end up looking at this right now. We've got really only districts 1 and 2 that have lots of room to grow. And so the district 1 and 2 representatives are going to be taxed with rezonings more frequently.
I'm still confused.
For
Well,
Greenville.
regardless of whoever that council member is, if there's broad opportunities for development,
Right.
well, we're gonna try to anticipate the community. We're gonna try to configure this map to make sure the constituency within that district is gonna be more acceptable to grow. That's
No,
not one of the
Yeah.
criteria.
yeah, no,
And-
absolutely.
Okay, so now that being
No,
said-
that's not the point.
Yeah, that being said, regardless of where the growth opportunity is on our perimeter,
Yeah.
they're gonna have a representative,
Right,
and they're gonna have people in the city who have to address those
Yeah.
questions.
right. So the simplest way to put this, I guess, is it is perhaps as important for every council district member to have a vested interest in the city growing outwards as it is for them to have a vested interest in owning the downtown.
And I think that map addresses that very point.
And so the idea of the pie-shaped map, I think covers that. I think one of the challenges I have with the particular pie-shaped map, and apologies to staff, I don't know how many machinations and versions y'all went through to try to get to this. But when I look at the deviations, again, going back to this idea that we kind of want to anticipate where population is going to be so that we don't diminish those voters' voting power 8 years down the road, 10 years down the road.
Right.
I look at the target deviations for districts 1, 2, and 4, and note that 4 is a little bit different on the pie shape because 4 opens up to the area where, if we go back to our estimated population of approved lots and units, we've got a big growth area in that. Those 3 districts are all positive percentage above the target deviation, and districts like 3, very low, and 5, similarly under. It's just concerning to me that those 3 districts that might be the ones that see the most growth are already for population above the ideal.
Right.
And so this version of the pie shape, like, I really like the idea of the pie shape for what we've discussed. But I kind of feel like I'd like to see some tweaks and some possibilities, and maybe there isn't a better option to also get to pie, but I'm still curious.
Educate me again, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I understand the deviation, so if you were in a perfect world, you could make some changes on the deviation target. What would you like to have? Okay, in 5, would we expect growth, correct? In 5, we expect growth?
So the challenge with the pie is that it's so different from our regular district numbers. In some ways, we have to throw them out and kind of hold up the estimated population map, the growth areas from our last meeting, and kind of look at, and I'm gonna try to make lots of noise so the owl looks over and shows me showing. But we've got these red growth areas, and so you see there's a lot of potential growth out here in this area,
Which is where 4 is.
which in the pie one is 4. Some growth down in the Jamestown area, so you do get a little bit of that 5. A lot of growth over here in the pies 2, which is also more or less current 2. And so it just kind of trying to think where the growth is going to be. Have we built in enough?
I'm with you.
Does that make sense now?
That makes very good sense.
Okay.
Thank you. You explained it better than I did, right?
Yeah, well, that's cool. So, I mean, but dynamically, basically want to move some people out of those districts to reduce the target number as best you can on the ideal number. And the question is when you move them out, you don't have to necessarily change the pie shape. You just got to move some of the people into the other parts, slices of the pie, correct?
Right.
Yeah. And the challenge is, does it still look like a pie after we've done?
Well, I think that's what they.
Like that.
It's probably gonna look like my family's Thanksgiving pie where my brother gets a much bigger slice. Yeah. But yeah,
And the pie dynamic, and what impressed me again was that we have a buy-in to the central part of Greensboro, the downtown business area. Everybody does. So with that, and that might be one of the things as they look at it, that they try to maintain, and then they can do these adjustments as best they can on the fringes to try to accomplish reducing populations in the areas within that 5% deviation to provide opportunity for growth.
So let me check in for a second. Hi, as I slipped in while you're talking. So it feels like there is some consensus for the pie shape option. Am I close?
We haven't heard from Laura and Ellen on that, and I'd like to hear and touch base with them on how y'all feel about pie as a direction.
and Teresita is on line, right?
Oh.
Teresita, are you with us?
Okay.
I like the pie shape, especially when it comes to the downtown. I agree with Mr. Bob. It's time for us, I mean, we have to move forward. Greensboro is the 3rd largest city in the state. You know, we got to do some changes. District 4, am I mistaken? Is that the downtown area?
Well, actually, District 3.
Three taxes.
2 is downtown right now, yes.
So 2 or 1?
But, no, it stops short a little bit on 1 right now. We're talking right now, the way it's out now. District 1 stops about Douglas Street.
Okay.
And comes around, comes under and.
So Summit Avenue, which is 2, is going into downtown. And then 4. 3. 3 and 2 are tapping into downtown.
That's who taps in now.
Yeah, and 1 and 3.
Sort of.
1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, 1 picks up something on the
Okay.
south side, yeah. Yeah, so if we really wanted to get, everybody in there, we'd have to fiddle around some more.
With the patch shape.
And it might be hard to get everybody in there. But,
Yeah, it's gonna be hard to get
we might get one more.
everyone in there.
Yeah.
But I like what I see on the patch shape. It's including a little bit of 1, 2, and 3, but it's more 5 and 4. 11 moves for District 5 and 6 moves for District 4. Is what I set over here calculating. But I do like it. It may need a little tweaking. Yeah, a little.
What do you think?
I like the idea of the pie shape. I like the idea of to make each district look more like the city, more representative, more diverse. I like the idea of making city council members having to listen to everybody across the spectrum. I like that idea, but I also think with that whole perimeter development idea we're talking about, it will make us more mindful of growth and make growth more fair. You know, if we're looking at growth everywhere, it's like, well, why is all the growth gonna be in this area? We've got these other 4 districts as well. So I think as well as the city core is gonna make us hopefully more mindful about the fairness of where developers and where we're going to encourage developers to come in and invest. So I like it for both reasons, for the perimeter and the city, and I like it for making city council members having to listen to all on the spectrum. So, you know, my early preferences for that, but I'm still open.
Yeah, and remember, we're gonna see 2 kinds of growth. One is gonna be what we call greenfield, which is out on the edges where something's not developed, or maybe you know, maybe it's 5-acre lots, but somebody buys them all up and turns them into a city development. The other kind is infill development, where you're changing the face of the neighborhood, and development and redevelopment, and everybody needs to, all the council members need to be involved in that too. Everybody needs to have to understand it all. So you got that, and they're all very important to vibrant city right along with
I
downtown.
agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
And the state, by its efforts, forcing you to do infill. And they restricted your ability to annex out in these areas, and therefore you're gonna have to grow within your control area presently and fill in these spots. So, and I think this plays right into that, since the state is forcing you to do it. And now we're gonna have council members who all have some say in that, or have some need to have say.
So here's a question, since it seems like there's general agreement on the pie shapes, but also wanting to direct staff to try to do better. Are those goals big enough that we would want to give staff the leeway to divide some of the precincts if they need to balance? Okay, staff's getting wide eyed. I'm just trying to figure out
I
what.
just looked at the town meeting with the director of elections for Gilbert County. I don't want him to hate us.
Okay, I just asking, I'm trying to think about, because I know we're asking you guys to, I mean, you already came up with a pie shaped map, and we're like, hey, maybe get these guys a little bit closer on into downtown. that kind of thing, and I'm just trying to think about extra tools.
Well, I think that was gonna be my next question. So what are give us ideas of what does a tweak sound like to you? What does it feel? Is it we want to have not so many changes between 4 and 5? What are the tweaks that come to mind that you would like, or it doesn't even have to be the map direction and tell us to do stuff on the map, but what's the outcome that you don't see on this pie shaped map that you might like us, that you'd like us to strive for? What kind of outcomes would you like us to shoot for?
Is growth the only thing we're looking at?
No.
That's what I'm saying. What about these other criteria? That's my thing. I feel like growth is being looked at. So I would just like more information about how it's affecting contiguous race and neighborhoods of interest. You know, growth has been covered, so if you've got anything to tell us about these other criteria.
Yeah, unless Ryan has a burning desire to see a precinct split, I would hope we would.
Yeah, ideally not, and that's me trying to think, trying to, give them tools.
Okay.
You love the panic attack over here.
Yeah, and only, when we can't avoid it, and only on, major, major divides, thoroughfares and rivers and stuff,
But Ellen, to your question about talking about other stuff, on the pie-shaped draft map, in the lower right-hand corner, there's, we do still have 2 majority-minority districts, which is what we've got now, so that's ensuring we've got that.
I guess my concern is, do we account for, does the pie shaped map account for the growth that is projected in District 2?
Probably District 2 as we have it now. Remember the red and orange and stuff on this map of growth, that's just subdivisions and multifamily developments. They're already approved and they can move forward to build now. Typically, those can be built and sold out in 2 or 3 years, unless it's a really big project. So what's going to happen for the other 7 years of the 10 years is that's kind of art, but we look at those kinds of things.
Yeah, unless I'm confused, we have the ideal of 59,807 on the board. You can either have 5% over, 5% under, and I get the feeling that you anticipate some growth. You're trying to not put as many people in there anticipating that you're going to have some additional growth. But once we get these numbers, just like now, nothing jumps out at me on these current numbers as they are. If you have solid growth, I mean, in 10 years, they're going to revisit it. I mean, they don't become ineligible to vote just because all of a sudden you had something boom in the economy in one of your districts. In 10 years, you go back and adjust. So, I don't think we should be so tied up in the idea of the target numbers. If we got the numbers within the legally mandated figures, they're legitimate. And we hope, but based on our history, we got work to do based on what's happening in Raleigh and Charlotte. And our numbers are not that good. So, I mean, we're being overly optimistic, in my opinion, to try to get too hung up on the target number of growth that may not happen.
Yeah, and I think it'll happen.
Well,
But,
but it doesn't stop.
we'll see. Let's bet something fun.
And I hope they do. I mean, I'm pulling with you. I do think they have to happen too, but that doesn't invalidate your numbers.
No, it doesn't, but by the same token, if we can avoid being here 10 years later, and 1 or 2 of our districts are, at 7 or 8 or 9% over,
But
that's
you
what
can't avoid that.
We're gonna be here 10 years later.
Yeah, you're gonna be here 10. I hope I'm here 10 years later.
Yeah, we are gonna be here 10 years later, because that's required by the Constitution.
We're gonna be here anyway, so.
Yeah, you're gonna be here adjusting it.
I think there's disconnect in us as individuals
Yeah.
being here. Yeah.
Pardon me. Yes, we're gonna be doing this again, or the city's gonna be doing this again in 10 years. Everybody does, it's required. But if you have districts that, if you didn't think about the future growth, and you have districts that end up in 10 years, 7 or 8% or 10% over the limit, not only do you have a lot of work to do then, but you have those districts whose voices, their votes have been diluted for years, and perhaps as many as 7 or 8 years.
Can we ever?
And so I'm just saying that we,
Okay.
let me finish. I'm just saying that we take a minute and look at that and see what we can do about it. I'm not suggesting that we, add 3 months worth of meetings to, get it down to 12 decimal points kind of thing.
You're referring to future growth, correct?
Right.
Well, District 2, I've lived in District 2 for going on 18 years now. I've seen the most growth I've ever seen in District 2. That's actually there now, not to be projected, but that is actually there.
Yeah.
District 2 probably has more development going on right now as far as single family homes and these apartments, Revolution Mills and Print Works and all of that. It has added a lot of people in District 2.
So based on the pie-shaped map, what districts do you think are in danger of being overpopulated in 10 years?
Good question.
Possibly, the way this is drafted, oddly enough, possibly District 4, District 2, and District 1, off the top of my head, are the area. District 2 and District 1, we actually do have a negotiated boundary with the city of Burlington for, where we'll both start annexing. I assume that's still in place. But it's pretty far east. Really what limits us over there is just topography and can you get water and sewer over there. So District 2 and District 1 are, I think, going to see the most growth. They have the most room, and we're going to see don't discount the impact of the Greensboro Randolph mega site. It's not going to be, I'm not going to say that out loud because I really don't want to jinx it. But when we get somebody on that mega site, and it will happen, and it will be a transformative employer, and there's going to be demand for development near it, partly because Randolph County doesn't want any development around it. So all the workers, houses, offices, retail, everything else, there's going to be demand over on this side of the city. So.
Just for the history, have we ever had booms in development of 7%?
That's a good question now. You have some historical data, I would suspect, since it's over census, that what has been the most aggressive growth that we've ever had. At least give us some idea.
Yeah.
So for the last 10 years, you can look at that, we roughly, and looking for Dana's face, make sure I'm not saying anything wrong. We have roughly grown a little over 1% every year compounded, so which is what our growth rate is, roughly 10% between.
Citywide.
Citywide. The biggest growth jumps were in the 50s and 60s when the state allowed massive annexations. But since then, that's kind of been Greensboro's story as long as I've been here. Like, we were very happy. I remember the president of the Chamber of Commerce talking about we grew between 2.5% and 3%, and they were concerned about it overheating. Well, our friends in Raleigh and Charlotte, they worry because their growth rates are 7, 8, and 9%. We haven't seen anything like that in a long time.
What about the growth within a district? Have you seen a District 5 grow 7% in 10 years, or a District 1 grow 7%?
Well,
yeah, maybe you have, I just don't know.
Well, the way the districts have been, how this process has been handled in the 34 years I've worked for the city is not, each time it's been different, let's put it that way. So this time, the council was very deliberate in saying we need to look at these things. Now, I will say, projecting ahead, hoping that big things grow in, if I were a betting person, I would say districts 1 and 2 are gonna continue to grow. And the way this is drawn, probably District 4, believe it or not, will grow because we've just changed the noise cone and opened up 1,000 acres for development. That previously had been not so much. And so I think if that's my bet of where the big hot areas are. In District 5, to a degree, you can see things that were kind of the way it's drawn in the pie, you can see how things could fill out. There are, bits and pieces. District 3 is big already, and there are still infill sites to be had in that district. It's been, and that's actually been one of our most popular multifamily in the last year. So but there's not a projection. My crystal ball is cloudy. But those are the things that just, as I see development and growth that just comes across my desk at the moment, I'd say 1 and 2 are still gonna be moving very well over the next few years. And we're gonna continue to move those city property lines, those city limits out, or some of them are already out to 85 and 40, where we're backfilling back to the city
So you're
limits.
saying the growth, it could be possible if we were lucky, above 7-8% in a 10-year time?
So in this 10-year time, we have grown 10%. It's 1% a
Citywide,
year.
citywide.
Yeah, citywide. It is 1% a year. And compounded is a little over 10%. That's taking in a recession.
That's not equally distributed over the.
No, it's not. But again, the most growth that we've seen has been 1 and 2, and I suspect because of we got Publix, we have rezoned for 1, 2, 3 industrial projects that's in this eastern band in the past 18 months. So it's more job growth. So that will start needing housing and other things. Do I think it could grow 7%? Could be. We just rezoned for 1,400 units out in McConnell and annexed. So it's possible. So I think, but I understand the idea of wanting to prepare for growth and not over tilt. On the other hand, I don't want to have paralysis of analysis and we go drive ourselves crazy. Preparing for some, not getting hung up on how much might be the middle ground to think about here.
And that's where I am. I'm not suggesting analysis paralysis. I'm suggesting let's just do that bit of due diligence. And since 34 years are not undistinguished at all, but it's been slow growth rate. And that's been basically NAFTA, since NAFTA. I was born and raised around here, and it's been here for 300 years. But I have lived in other places, and 2 of them have really hot growth rates, and 1 of them had a 15% growth rate every year for 15 years in a row. And so it can happen. And we've got 2 mega sites plus the mega site in East Chatham County, which doesn't have a whole lot of, they don't have a good broad swath of all kinds of housing down there. So all of those mega sites are going to drive growth here, and they're all hot and they're all getting looked at a lot, and it could be sooner rather than later. And when they all are, when they all have users on them, and they're all going to want transformational employers. So when we have users on them, we're going to see, my guess is we're going to see a really hot growth rate that nobody who's still alive here in Greensboro has seen. Certainly not in modern history. I could be wrong about that, but I could be right.
Okay, so how do we move forward?
So a process question. how many more meetings do we have before we have to present something to council?
This is by count. Matt, are you still on there?
I am. We have a meeting scheduled for Tuesday, October the 12th. That's your last meeting that's scheduled, and that is to make a recommendation to council. Their hearing is the 19th. So you could do a meeting a little bit before that or a little bit after that if you needed to. And there are choices next week too, if you want to do that. I think the best thing to do is for you to do what Sue was asking you a few minutes ago, which is give us direction about what you want us to accomplish and let staff go try to draw these maps. I think you're going to have a hard time sitting in that room drawing the maps. Give us direction about what you want to see and let us go try to take a shot at it.
So I have scheduled, so city council has a hearing on October 19th.
Yes.
A whole other month before they have to, 2 more meetings after that before the target deadline.
They are scheduled, yes, ma'am, they are scheduled to vote on this on November 2nd, Tuesday, November 2nd. And the last chance to vote on it would be November 16, but that is after the date that we have to tell the Board of Elections whether or not we're going to have a map. We have to tell the Board of Elections on the 12th, and we have to have it to them by the 17th. So it would be difficult to pull this off if we miss the Greensboro vote in that first week of November.
Ellen had her hand up. You still want to make a comment?
The last question that's on my mind, like I said, it's kind of easier to talk about growth and that kind of thing. But the last question on my mind, and I don't know planning if y'all can address this, because you said we don't have like neighborhood maps, and just, I like the pie shape because of the diversity that it would do, but in all these precincts, is this, in these 22 precincts, moving those, if we did those, is there any way we can determine how that's going to affect communities of interest? Just is there any way we can look at that?
I think we can look in general because we
Just
don't
in
have
general,
defined
yeah.
boundaries, but we can take what the neighborhood Congress has
Yeah.
and just, because those are in their fuzzy boundaries, so we can take a look just to check and see
Oh,
how it
I
works.
see
Does that
that.
work?
Yeah, just to see, because that is a lot of precincts.
And on that communities of interest topic, can we see a breakdown of the non-white population by, I guess primarily we have African American and Asian and Hispanic, right? Teresita educated us a little bit last week on a cluster of Hispanic population around G62, and that would be another reason not to pull District 4 down for that. So I'd like to better understand those groups too.
Absolutely, and actually, we do have an addition to the maps on these second pages, and these are online as well. On the maps that we showed earlier, it's actually a 3-page document, and the second 2 pages include a little bit deeper dive into the demographics. So that is there. Those are the categories that are available to us in this redistricting software.
Okay. So don't hate me, but can you generate, so I know where they are, which district they're in, but I don't know where they are in the district and how they visually, graphically cluster together. Can you run us a map with the Hispanic population and the African American population in 2 different colors?
Sure, we can do that. Yeah, and that would be similar to the map that you received last week, but it would be both of those pulled out.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
So to answer an earlier question of what would we like staff to do, I have sort of two things for staff to kind of think about and look at. One is, as we try to do the pie, any way to get 4 and 5 a little bit closer into downtown. I know that they're really, really close right now, and I also recognize those districts are very, very dense, which means it's hard to just move a precinct. Those precincts are really dense, so it's hard to move a precinct here or there without having a dramatic swing. But that's sort of a question as we try to really think, where's the pie go? Right now, the pie looks like it's at, the middle of the pie is that line between 13 and 12 down where it meets G45 almost. That seems, and I feel like I'd like to see it just a little bit further east. Apologies to staff, that is a very kind of vague pie thing. The other is when we're looking at the target deviation on this pie, I'd really like to see 1, 2, and probably 4 a little under rather than a little over. I don't know if it can be done, but right now we've got 3 being under and 5 being under, and I think you could probably put a little bit more into 3, and do a few other things to shift and balance. And please understand, like, growth is not a big thing. It is speculative, and in my mind, sort of the ideal would be, in the mid years, that's going to be our sweet spot. And then, probably the last, or maybe even the last 2 election cycles, we might be off.
Yeah.
And we're going to be, we'll be off for the first one, but really trying to maximize that sweet spot. Marlene, it would be great if the districts were perfect 10 years from now, but
That's,
I
I'm
would-
not asking for perfect.
yeah.
Please, dispel yourselves of that notion, I'm not asking for perfect.
And so, I don't think we need to have one of the districts that we expect growth in to be, 4.5% under target. But I would like to see, a percentage point or 2 below target, if we could. And again, I recognize that staff, you guys did a real good job sitting down and figuring out this pie thing, and then now and then I'm sure others are gonna throw some extra considerations on top, and so you might come back to us with 6 different maps to discuss next time. But that's where I am in terms of giving requests to staff, and please, anybody else has some thoughts, please toss
So
them.
let me ask the committee a question. You're debating between growth and the pie shape. If you had to sacrifice one of those over the other, which is more important to you, getting more of the districts into downtown or trying to have the growth-oriented districts under the deviation?
Take pie shape more into downtown, would be my.
I would agree to that.
It would be me. Yeah, I was just about to suggest that personally, I'd be happy to see more than one version of this pie shape. And I expect there's enough to be tweaked that y'all might determine you need to show us more than one version, so.
All right, I think that's helpful for staff. I will tell you, going back to Ms. Weiner's question, she described these districts as potentially creating a more diverse district. And I'll suggest to you that in this context, diverse might be the opposite of communities of interest. So I think what we'll have to do is, as we look at getting the pie shape to work, and subordinate to that, trying to get the growth-oriented districts under the deviation, under the ideal size, I think we'll also have to do the best job we possibly can at looking at the community of interest question and make sure that we're not splitting up areas that do have a demonstrable community of interest. So we will take a shot at that. But I think I just summarized what y'all have said. If I got it wrong, tell me now.
No, that's exactly what I was want them to look at.
That's a legitimate question, and Mac, I think the current map as it's laid out, pretty well keeps communities of interest in line, at least by looking at it, I think it is.
Well, I think that we probably need to affirm that we all agree that the pie shape map is going in the right direction. So I don't want staff to think we want to make too many changes.
Yeah.
Especially to, I want to be clear, that our majority minority districts, I think, should receive as little alterations as possible. With the pie shape map.
Certainly you don't wanna, make enough changes that they're not majority districts.
Oh,
Right.
well, I like the balance and the variance of the district, as they say in the pie shape map, so.
I can tell you already, G11, you have done the same thing with G11 that we did with lease change 2 with GO2. So G11 is gonna want to stay in District 3.
Where is G11?
It's immediately north of downtown. And it includes some of that. Yeah. So, and actually, it really takes District 3 out of owning some of downtown.
That's true.
I guess what I'm saying is, I'm like Alan, I really want to know the community.
Fisher Park is
the
the main
neighborhood.
community there, Fisher Park. And probably Lakeland Park.
Yeah, I agree, they want to stay in District 3.
Yeah.
I agree, since I know where it's at, I can judge it more if I know where it is.
Yeah. Should we, again, with the caveat that splitting precincts is the last resort, but are we willing to split precincts like along Market and Elm in order to get districts vested in downtown?
Just wait and see.
I would be inclined to give staff the leeway to try
To do
that,
that.
because I'd be willing to support that. And, you know, all of our addresses are public record, and I'm sure that the Board of Elections will come banging on all of our doors as individuals when we make their lives harder. But, you know, hopefully it only has to be done once in 10 years. Yeah.
You said Market, are you referring to West Market, East Market?
Well, both, I mean, Market Street.
That's what I was
Elm Street,
thinking, you referring to both.
Yeah, and those might not be the right places to do that, but, you know, but again, major thoroughfares, major barriers.
Well, we're splitting church, so, you know.
Yeah, so we discussed that in the lease change, and frankly, you know, splitting church, if we're taking 11 out of 3 and moving back over like that might make sense. And
Yes.
so, you know, staff, again, please direct the complaints to the members of the committee, not to y'all. We're asking y'all to do the stuff. It's not your fault.
We're sort of trying to do things that will make the most sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right, and I don't know how much sense it makes to split a precinct based on the logic of trying to get all of the districts to, I don't know if we're trying to touch it, I mean, they're close to me, I don't know how close is close enough. But to split a precinct to make them closer together, I don't know if that would be, I don't know if I agree with that.
Well, I'm mainly thinking in terms of, and forgive me, staff, you're too far down in the weeds, but just thinking about the issue that Carlene brought up with 11, taking 11 out of 3 and needing to move, a few more people into to balance. We had discussed the G26 just because it's so broad, east to west, and Church Street is a relatively easily identified marker for that division. So, but we did in our discussion last time, make it very clear, like, you not want to start carving out blocks and neighborhoods and anything like that. Yeah, but to your point, yeah, I think should try to avoid, at this point, I would ask staff, hey, have we given you enough headaches? Is there anything else that someone wants to toss
That is
out?
that loaded, Brian. So I guess I go back to I'm making sure I understand the outcomes we're looking for. We want the pie shape to get as many to touch in the downtown to create that as possible. We are concerned about if we are breaking up communities of interest. We need to look at how the neighborhoods roughly fit and what we're doing here. There are a couple that feel that perhaps we should look at switching back and forth. And so the other piece of this, Matt, did you think this committee was submitting one map to the council to consider, or what did you think I mean, that's the other piece I wanted to confirm.
I don't think we have direction from council on that. Nothing that I've seen says that they wanted one map or two maps or three maps. I've not seen any direction. I think that's going to be up to the committee to determine for themselves what they want to submit.
Well, I hope we can come to the consensus on one map.
Yeah.
And then have the other
If
options.
they want all the maps,
What
we can just send the
did
ones
you
we
guys
got to
blow
them.
it? We can't believe you did this.
Yeah.
What else you got? We only have those back pocket maps.
Yeah, so just kind of thinking about it, Steve's point, I think if we as a committee get to a point of saying, here's our recommended version of the pie, most likely. But in terms of back pocket, things like presenting the least change map to them to say, if y'all didn't want to do that much and y'all are comfortable with the districts that you have, and you as the deciders want to say, we don't want to mess with our district lines, then that's a decision that the council can make.
Yeah. Just looking at how, continuing to stare at this, how we might get more folks in, get more districts in downtown. District 1, even without G44, already has part of downtown. So, you could move G44 into District 5 and bring them in, or that might be one, or G69 that you split up a little bit. But looks, even just glancing at it, if you take G11 back into District 3 and G44 into District 5, you've got 4 districts that are owning some piece of downtown without splitting anything, as near as I can tell, on that this small. And there's not much way to get District 4 in there without,
You have to go into 13, even then.
yeah, you could go into 13, but really even the 13 is all residential development. It's in the old, what most cities consider to be, city center. And one day we will too, but it's not in the downtown proper with the mixed land uses.
So we're scheduling a meeting on the 12th of October? Okay.
Dana, Ladidra, do you think we're going to confirm the direction that you guys will be playing with, making sure we always have everybody in the room?
You mean in regard to proposing more draft maps? I'll read my list. So we want to consider communities of interest. You want to take a look at the neighborhood Congress data in comparison to the pie-shaped map. Get 4 and 5 closer to downtown. Try to get districts 1, 2, and 4 under the ideal district size. Potentially propose multiple pie-shaped maps with different renditions of possibilities. We want to, as much as possible, have little variation to the majority minority districts. And then I wrote down some of the specific precinct moves that we talked about. We still want to stay away from splitting precincts to the extent possible. But, and that is one of our criteria, but it sounds like you have given planning staff creative freedom to do that if it can't be avoided. Did I get all the factors?
You got them all.
Yeah,
And move-
and I think
move to
we need
back
to
to
promise,
District three.
promise y'all a nice dinner after all, we're gonna put y'all through.
But
And move just G11 back to District 3.
Marlene, what about, you were asking about the possibility of the maps with the Hispanic and non-white.
Right,
still-
yeah.
That would,
Looking at those population groups too.
yeah, how that affects them. Yeah.
Dana, did you have anything else, or did you capture everything?
That's,
Okay, I want to make sure everybody thoughts are clear. You know what direction we're going in. Matt, do you have anything else for us to think about?
No, I don't. I think there is a probability that we can bring you back that material on the 12th. And you can debate it then. And it sounds to me like you're not that far off of decisions and recommendations when we give you some more maps that show you what you can or can't do with a pie shape. I think you'll at that point be pretty much ready to make your recommendation.
Mac and city staff, would it be possible to get that information in advance of the Tuesday, even if it's something by like maybe Friday afternoon, the day before, so that we can look at it over weekend, Monday and Tuesday, just so that as
Absolutely.
individuals we can have a copy, look at the stuff, think about it, not seeing it for the first time here.
sure, yes, I could do that.
Absolutely. That would be the goal. We'll get it to you as soon as we've finished with it.
And also, I would say if it's posted publicly, then that's another opportunity for folks to give us some input.
I just remembered one more cluster of comments I've gotten on the walks in the neighborhood kind of thing. And that is whether we could, in the pie-shaped map, we've taken a huge chunk of District 5 and put it into District 4. And we, in our discussions here today, District 4 is probably bigger than we want it to be anyway. So I'd like to see some consideration given maybe to giving, maybe splitting District 4 and District 5, sort of bisecting the airport, and let District 5 take the precincts on the southern half of that cluster around the airport, and leave the northern part in District 4.
So really, you're talking about 64. Putting 64 into 5 out of 3.
And maybe 43 and 42, 42 and 41, somewhere in that area.
Yeah, that's gonna be hard with population, I think.
And I'm sorry to interject, one of
Yeah.
the participants on Zoom does have their hand raised. I would ask our moderator if it's okay to allow them to speak. Gary Mccants, did you have a comment?
I do have one comment which may not have any real impact on what you're doing, but apparently this process has a lot of implications, not just on the voting population, but from an economic development standpoint and resources that are going in some of these districts. I know there are discussions that are being had about development in certain districts. So my first question was, which districts are in question to be redrawn? Or are there all districts that are looking at having some alterations? That was really my concern early on.
Yeah, so for the pie shaped map, which is what the discussion has been centered around today, that involves right now 22 precinct changes and they're spread throughout the district. If you compare this to one of the least change maps that only moves, I believe, 1.5 precincts, then that's only going to impact those areas. So it depends on the map that we're looking at, but all districts do have a potential to be impacted by the redrawing of the lines and the moving of precincts.
And if I may, on Mr. Mccants' question about development, it's not that the districts define where development or resources for development would necessarily go. We have an estimate of where we may see more people. There's a map that was provided to the committee during the last meeting that has some areas where we expect to see growth. And so more growth means more population within a particular district. So one thing that we've been discussing throughout is, how do we do a good job to ensure that 10 years from now, the districts aren't wildly off of that 5% variance that's recognized under the law for when a district has become too large. So that's what we're looking at. It's not that the districts and whether or not they include certain areas will determine where development will or will not happen.
Okay, I just need to understand because I know where most of the development is now in Greensboro. So I had that question. And so in the long scheme of things, certainly equitable distribution of resources is critically important as the city grows over the next 10 years. That is critical, and particularly for some of those areas that have not seen any resources that has any significant impact for any kind of growth, quite frankly, and when it comes to residential or commercial. So that's just my question. I just wanted to get that on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. I did interrupt the conversation. I think Marlene and Ryan were speaking about some of the particular changes that you wanted to see with the project.
Yeah, yeah, and that can, be a map that, a different version of the pie map, if you need to show it to us that way. But there's benefit, just like downtown and growth outward, there's also benefit in having the airport area served by more than one district council member. So, I would kind of draw a line through here if it were that simple. I'm looking at, yeah.
Yeah, so just for staff to consider, if 5 can include something like 64 that gets a fair amount of airport in exchange for picking up something to get closer to downtown. I mean, just sort of work through and
it's going to need more than that, partly because the reason whatever it is so G64 is so big is because there's hardly any residential there. It's very non-residential, industrial, commercial, that sort of thing. So I think to do that, we're going to have to reach up to those G47 precincts to do that. So, but I think we can. We should at least look at it.
I will remind the committee that there are a couple of other things that make this more difficult than it might appear on the surface. One is that you have to maintain contiguity. And when you get into those precincts that are up in the northwest corner of the city, contiguity can be difficult. And the second is that precincts aren't a one-for-one exchange. Some of the precincts are relatively small in population and others are relatively large in population. So as we try to do this, it's sometimes not quite as easy as it looks on the surface.
downtown is more important than airport.
Well said. And I'm a supporter of the airport, and I don't think they're gonna be wanting any support. First, They haven't in the past, and they won't in the future, in my opinion.
We have a game plan moving forward.
I think we do.
That's good.
All right,
That means,
all lines are clear,
Yeah.
one circuit paper meeting. Lines are clear, our hearts are open, nothing else to be said at this point.
Silence is disagreement.
so I'll see everybody Tuesday.
See you on the 12th.
Well,
You'll be getting
we can-
that thing.
Yeah.
Oh, we can see.